As you may have heard, healthcare occupations are in high demand all over the world, and Australia is no exception. But if you're a healthcare professional thinking of migrating to Australia, you may be feeling excited but also a bit nervous. Starting a new job and life in a new country is a big step. And recently, there have been many updates and changes in Australia's immigration policies, which can make the process even more confusing. So in this video, we'll talk to a registered migration agent and an OET representative, the leading English test for healthcare professionals, to help you understand the current immigration process if you're a healthcare professional looking to migrate to Australia. We'll also talk about the different visas available for you, as well as the general requirements for immigration. Thank you, OET, for sponsoring today's video, and if you're interested, keep watching. Hi both, thanks for coming. So to start off, Alex, could you please briefly introduce yourself and your role at OET?
Yeah, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm Alex. I'm in the education team at OET. The OET Test is a global leader in English language testing, specifically for healthcare professionals. Our test is accepted around the world by governments and recognising organisations. And part of my job is to make sure that test takers have the resources and confidence to do well on test day and then to move on with their healthcare career in Australia or another English-speaking country.
Thanks for that. And Tarane, could you please briefly introduce yourself as well?
Yes, of course. Hi, Martina. Hi, Alex. My name is Tarane Aryanfar, Managing Director of Migration Affairs. We assist individuals, professionals across the world and companies with addressing their visa issues and professionals wanting to migrate to Australia. And today, specifically, we're concentrating on healthcare professionals.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, Tarane, I think one of the main questions that people in the audience have is, if I'm a healthcare worker looking to migrate to Australia, what visas are currently available for me?
Yes, good question. There are a variety of visas. The healthcare professionals, all occupation, 99% if not all, are on medium-term occupation, which is on highly demand, and there are all visas available to them. However, the most commonly used are subclass 189, a skill independent visa. It's a permanent point-tested visa for a skilled worker not sponsored by an employer or family members. Applicants need to score at least 65. That's the minimum points required for this visa. However, we suggest based on different occupation, maybe they require a bit higher points. And have a positive skill assessment as a major requirement, and an invitation is required from federal government. Next would be subclass 190 is a skill nominated visa, very similar to 189 visa, but requires nomination by the state and the territory, providing an additional 5 points. So it's an amazing opportunity. If you get nominated by state, you get 5 extra points, and it's a permanent visa as well. So we have skilled work regional visas. It's a temporary visa, subclass 491. It's a temporary visa for 5 years. Again, a points tested visa requires invitation from a state and territory and nomination. However, it has a pathway to permanent residency. So it's a great opportunity for people who are not achieving 65 points for 189 and 190 to choose this visa, because you get automatically 10 extra points compared to 190. These visas were independent of whether or not you secure an employment in Australia. There are other categories such as employer-sponsored visa. So I just go through 2 of them. Most common ones used by medical practitioners, medical healthcare professionals are subclass 482, a temporary skill shortage visa. It's a temporary visa for 4 years, allows employers to address skill shortages. And as you can see in Australia and everywhere else in the world, everyone needs healthcare workers. So they typically do not need full skill assessment. They may need provisional registration. And one amazing opportunity and advantage healthcare professionals, for example, a medical practitioner has, it's an age waiver. So if they're working in the regional areas, they can take advantage of age waiver and transition to permanent residency. Generally speaking, the age limitation is overall 45. And lastly, the employer nomination scheme, subclass 186, requires a job offer from Australian employers similar to 482. However, this one is a direct permanent residency. A lot longer processing time, and it needs a full skill assessment and at least 3 years of work experience.
Okay, thank you. And what occupations are considered healthcare professionals?
There are occupations typically included on the occupation list are, for example, general practitioner, resident medical officers, medical practitioners, nurses, registered nurses, nurse practitioners, a different category and stream and type of registered nurse, for example, aged care workers, dentists, pharmacists, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, medical laboratory scientists, psychologists, audiologists as well. All have different skill assessment authorities.
That's amazing, thank you. And what are the general requirements to migrate to Australia as a healthcare worker?
Excellent question. So first step would be get a formal assessment, have a professional assessment to see whether or not you meet the eligibility for any of those visas mentioned and which one suits your circumstances or your family or your timeline. When you want to be in Australia, it's one of the first questions we ask, when do you want to be in Australia to healthcare professionals? They have a bit more power because their occupations are on demand, so they have access to different type of visas, so they can select and pick and choose depending their life circumstances and their migration timeline. So they really need to discuss this with a professional in order to see, okay, whether or not I meet the eligibility for subclass 482, 190, 189, and all of them would have different steps and different processing time. One that they shared mostly among all visa categories is a skill assessment. For some categories, they need to get full skill assessment, which could be quite a long process. We have a skill assessment authority for registered nurses, for example, as Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council, we call it ANMAC, and Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, APRA, and Australian Dental Council, to just name a few. They are the bodies that registering and authorizing a skill assessment process for healthcare, some of the healthcare professional. There are different streams of skill assessment as well, so you need to know based on the registration of the country you are in, which stream is suitable for you. So for example, I give you an example. ANMAC skill assessment for registered nurses from countries like Canada, Ireland, Hong Kong, Singapore, UK, and US is a lot more streamlined compared to other countries. So you really need to go through them to understand whether or not your first step is going through ANMAC and getting a skill assessment and which type of a skill assessment you need to do, or you need to go through APRA and get a full registration. To work in Australia in healthcare system, you must be registered in relevant medical board. So therefore, depending the type of visas, whether or not it's professional or full registration required. Typically speaking, for most provisional visas, you need provisional registration, depending the clinic or hospital you're working as well. And for most permanent visa, you need full registration. And we get to English proficiency requirement. So for healthcare professionals, not from exempted country, the English proficiency is the major requirement. And the English test, OET, is designed specifically for healthcare professional, testing English in real medical scenarios. So depending your category of healthcare, there are scenarios specifically designed for you. So that's one of the major requirements as well. So lastly, I would say considering your health checks and character checks. So the mandatory health requirement and police certification needs to be done as well. So brief overview of the requirements.
And in terms of the visa application process, what steps do I need to follow if I want to apply for an Australian healthcare visa?
So first step would be to get a proper assessment. Seek a detailed assessment from a migration consultant, determine eligibility and the best suitable visa for you and your family. I do see in the consultation many people come with an understanding of what they want to do. They want to apply for a 189 visa. And the most common misconception is that they think they can just apply for this visa, not understanding that this visa needs an invitation for application. And the processing time as well. So that's a lot longer processing time. So if you, for example, planning to be in Australia within the next 6 months before the year ends, you definitely cannot consider most of the permanent visas, and you need to step to temporary step first and moving on to permanent pathway. So understand the specific requirement for each visas. Points testers visas, get yourself points tested professionally. So go through your points. It is a system that available to public, so you can go through it and get a preliminary assessment of what are your points. However, the points is not finalized until you get a full skill assessment and your English results. So to know your exact points. And you need to also understand the nomination criteria if you're looking at a state sponsorship, especially if you're living inside Australia at the moment on a temporary visa or graduate visa. You need to look at and find out about the state you're living in and what is the nomination criteria for that state, and what are the regional work obligations if you're looking at moving to regional areas. So a major step would be, after you find out what's the requirements and what's the visa category is most suitable for you, you need to prepare documentation for it. Preparing documentation either for skill assessment, for registration, for English examination, sit for English test for OET. The OET provide lots of support in order for you to achieve what the mark you need for your visa category. And while you are preparing the skill assessment and registration process, especially if you're working with someone, while they're assisting you with those processes, you send them the documents and they providing you with support and going through application process, you can prepare and take the OET test. Definitely take advantage of OET preparation guideline and all available support they have. I leave it for Alex to go through them. They have plenty of assistance and support for the test takers.
And could you tell us a bit more how your migration agency can assist healthcare professionals in their visa application process?
Absolutely. Any professionals, specifically healthcare professionals, is getting the initial consultation assessment. In that initial consultation, we get all the documentation and the resume. We discuss with them what they want to achieve, and we assess the eligibilities for the type of visa that it would be their best option, the second best option, and we advise them accordingly. And the next step, if they wish to proceed with that option and get our assistance, so we start initiating the matter in our company and working with one of our lawyers, and we go through them step by step in order to gather the documentation. And for example, the first step would be skill assessment. After the outcome and the applicant has done the OET test, they come back to us for a second assessment on the point test assessment. And after they have the minimum points, we assess which state or territory or visa would be the best for them, and we discuss that with the applicant, and we express the interest for that specific visa category and for that state. After the invitation, we prepare the nomination application for that state or territory, and after the selection and nomination, we move on to visa stage. After lodgement of visa, our job is not done. We liaise with Department of Home Affairs in case of any request, any issues, and we monitor the application all the way to the decision.
Amazing, that's fantastic. Now, in terms of registration requirements, if I'm a healthcare worker living in another country and I want to get registered in Australia, what steps do I need to follow?
In terms of registration, you really need to go to the authority, to the council, or to the body that registered your professional. For example, for APRA, medical practitioner can look at what's the registration requirements are. Again, depending of the visa category, you may only need a provisional registration, which the requirements would be different to a full registration. For full registration, you need to pass some examination and so on, depending the authority society, so Dentistry Council or ANMAC. So that's the first step would be. The most recent change I just recalled, which is very important for example, for medical practitioner with registration with APRA, there was an identity check that they needed to be present in person, physically present in person, which face a challenge for people wanting to become registered in Australia but living outside Australia. So that has changed since December 2023. So identity approval can be done through the certified documentation now.
And what about trailing spouses? What are the requirements for trailing spouses who are looking to return to the workforce and obtain registration in Australia?
Excellent question. So for a spouse's partners, depending on the visa they're holding and the main applicant's visa category, if they are in Australia, and the first thing they need to look at, what's the my work limitation? If they don't have much limitation and they are allowed to work in Australia, the next thing they need to do, very similar to main applicants, as a healthcare professional, they need to get registration to work in Australia. So either they need full registration or semi-registration. They can work with their employer or prospective employer in order to find out what they need to achieve for their profession.
Okay, so far we've touched on the visa application process as well as registration requirements. Drawing on your professional experience as a migration agent, what would you say are some of the most common challenges healthcare professionals face when applying for an Australian visa, and how can they overcome these challenges?
The first would be, I would say, the application process is complex. It has the added requirement of registration compared to any other occupation on the occupation list. That's the biggest hurdle. And then visa application steps and meeting all the requirements. So again, really discuss with migration professionals, migration agents or lawyers in order to first find out your registration skill assessment requirement and the type of visa most suited for your circumstances. Other challenges I've seen is English language requirement for people from countries that they don't speak or use English as their main language. So difficulty on achieving the required score. And when professionals doing consultations, they might not even be aware of the support that OET offers because it's specifically designed for healthcare professionals and for the industry. It has the positive aspect of familiarity. So for healthcare professionals specifically, I say is a must-use test for OET so they can get themselves prepared by using the support and assistance they have. So these are the two main challenges I see in the process of migration for healthcare professionals.
Will you be able to share some success stories or case studies of healthcare professionals who've successfully migrated to Australia with the help of your agency?
Yes, sure. Many success stories, especially in recent years. A couple of interesting ones. We had a very senior endocrinologist that passed the age limit. At the time, she was 62 years old, and I had no hope of migration, but I had a dream of migrating to Australia. So we gone through a global talent visa process with her successfully. It might not apply now with the current requirement of global talent visa. However, that was successful more than a year ago. And a medical practitioner, Bangladeshi national who were working in the UK but dreamed to be in healthcare system in Australia and working in Australia. He was sponsored by SA Health in South Australia, and the subclass 482 was done with provisional registration, and the process was amazingly quick, and he was shocked how quick was the process. Within 2 weeks, I believe, over Christmas break. We have Canadian registered nurse that after doing consultation with us realized how straightforward is the skill assessment with ANBAC because of her registration, Canadian registration, secured an invitation promptly. It's a few examples.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And now, Alex, going back to you, as we know, one of the main requirements to migrate to Australia is to demonstrate proficiency in English. Based on your experience working at OET, why is the OET English test the right test for healthcare professionals migrating to Australia?
Thanks, Martina. There are lots of reasons. I'll give maybe the top 3. First of all, as Taranay mentioned, OET test results are recognised and accepted by AHPRA, the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. So that means you can use your OET scores to apply for registration in your field, which is probably the most important thing to know. Secondly, the OET test has been developed especially for healthcare workers. So unlike other language proficiency tests, the OET test uses test tasks that simulate real workplace scenarios. So this means that our test takers are doing things and using skills and using language that they already use or definitely will use in their roles as healthcare workers in English-speaking countries. And the third thing is that it's really easy to prepare for our test. We have a huge range of preparation resources, including pre-complete practice tests on our website. Healthcare professionals are busy people, as we all know. So we have self-directed study options, and we also have a whole network of expert OET teachers. So our test takers can feel really confident on test day and really well prepared.
And how is OET different from other English tests?
Yeah, OET is different. Other high-stakes language tests have been designed to assess either general English or academic English, which is really measuring readiness for university study. So those tests cover a huge range of topics like crime, art, the environment, and the tasks for the academic test. They're academic in nature. So you might have to analyze and describe information in a graph or a chart. You may have to write an academic essay or talk about specialist topics like space travel, consumerism, the media, basically anything. In the OET test, everything is healthcare related. So in the listening test, for instance, in part A, you're listening to a healthcare professional and a patient having a consultation, and your task is to complete the healthcare professional's notes. In the writing test, candidates write a letter to another healthcare professional based on case notes and documentation that would be familiar to them as part of their everyday duties. And the OET writing test, like the other subtests, was actually developed in collaboration with healthcare professionals who identified and shared with us the skills and the language that is really valued in the healthcare workplace. So the test is super relevant, familiar, practical, and test takers can feel confident with the topics that they're going to deal with on test day.
Now, you already touched a bit on this, but what bodies recognize the OET English test?
Yeah, as Taranay mentioned, the OET test is recognised by the Department of Home Affairs for migration and also for work and student visa purposes in Australia. OET results are also accepted by AHPRA, the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. So this agency is responsible for the registration and accreditation of 14 health professionals in Australia, including nursing, medicine, pharmacy, dentistry, physiotherapy, and more. Plus, we are recognised by a range of other recognising bodies like Speech Pathology Australia and the Australasian Veterinary Board Council. So vets can also take OET. We have a special version for each profession, so including vet science. You can also use OET test results to study in Australia. We're accepted by many universities, TAFE, and higher education institutions. You can find the whole list of organisations that accept OET test results on our website. And I just want to mention that each organisation sets its own requirements in terms of scores. So it's a good idea to reach out to them and find out what scores you need to achieve.
And for those healthcare professionals who are hearing about OET for the first time, how can they take OET and what's the format of the test?
Yeah, a big question, of course, really important one. Let's start with the format of the test. There are 4 parts in the OET test: listening, reading, writing, speaking. OET listening takes around 40 minutes. It has 3 parts, including the patient consultations in part A, and then there are multiple choice questions in parts B and C. In OET reading, you answer questions related to text that you would use either in the workplace, in a healthcare workplace, or as part of professional development as a healthcare worker. And there are a mix of gap fill, short answer, and multiple choice questions, 42 questions in total. OET writing and speaking are profession specific. So this means that nurses do the tasks for nursing, dentists do dentistry tasks, and so on. In writing, as I mentioned, the task is to write a letter to another healthcare professional. And in speaking, there are 2 role plays. So in the role plays, the test taker plays their professional role. So if you're a nurse, you take the role of a nurse. If you're a vet, you take the role of the vet, and you work with an interlocutor. The interlocutor takes the role of the patient or their carer or relative, or vet's the owner of the pet. And there are specific role play instructions for each role play, and it's a very realistic type of assessment. Both writing and speaking are then assessed by our highly trained OET assessors. And in terms of taking the test, we have a few options. So test takers can choose what works for them. We are a global test, so we have test centres all over the world. Depending on a city, test takers can take OET on paper at a test venue. So they will book through the website, oet.com, and they'll go to a test centre and complete the whole test there, listening, reading, writing, and then speaking. We also have a computer option. Test takers, again, book via oet.com and go to a test centre on a computer and complete listening, reading, and writing, and their speaking test is done via Zoom. Our website has all the information about both kinds of OET, and we have sample tests for paper and for computer versions as well.
Okay, that's great. And how can people prepare for the OET test?
Yeah, this is my pet topic as the education content manager. So there are lots of resources, as I mentioned. OET.com, our website, is the best place to start your OET preparation. We recommend starting with our free Intro to OET course. We have 3 versions, one for nurses, one for doctors, and one for allied health professionals. The course takes a couple of hours and it really guides you step by step through each part of the test and includes study tips and strategies and recommended resources. Next, we have the downloadable study guide. This contains information and links to our most popular, most useful resources. If someone wants to focus, for instance, on writing or focus on reading Part C in particular, we have a whole section devoted to that. So the study guide is like a companion and a checklist for OET preparation. We also have regular live streams on YouTube and on our Facebook channels. So people preparing for the test can come and join our live practice sessions and Q&A sessions for free, or they can catch up with our on-demand libraries on our YouTube channel. For those who want to study with a teacher, we have a network of preparation partners. You can find them on our website and search for someone in your area or someone online. These teachers have all completed teacher training with OET, so you can trust them to provide you with really high quality OET preparation. And lastly, as I mentioned, we have sample tests available in both paper and computer format on the website.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing. And all the links to the OET website and other resources, you're going to find them in the description box below. Now, another question that many people in the audience are interested in is how can healthcare workers benefit from OET for their career development and for getting a job in Australia?
Yeah, this is probably what makes OET so unique and so special as a language test, in that as you're preparing for the test, you're also building language and building communication skills that you will absolutely need to be successful in an English-speaking healthcare environment. So for instance, if a nurse is wanting to move from India to Australia, they will find that with OET, preparing for the test develops their cultural awareness, of course, their language proficiency, and also their clinical communication skills. And these are useful, of course, in OET as a language test, but beyond OET in other tests like the OSCE and even the NCLEX, which are needed for registration. And by the way, I want to mention that we have a new OSCE test centre just opened in Melbourne, which is a great addition, as well as the Adelaide OSCE test centre. And beyond these tests, the skills and language are vital, of course, in the healthcare workplace. So knowing about things like patient-centred care, for instance, how to interact with patients and show empathy, how to ask questions effectively, how to communicate by writing efficiently. These are all skills that you'll build in OET and use in the workplace. And, we hope really help you progress up the ladder in the workplace as well.
So OET is not only relevant for migration purposes, but it can also help you improve your communication skills, cultural awareness, and help you in your career development as well. Now, Tarane, going back to you, based on your expertise as a migration agent, what would you say are the main benefits of moving to Australia as a healthcare professional, and what's the future outlook for healthcare occupations?
Okay, excellent. Before I answer that question, I just wanted to add, I'm so impressed at how much OET provides support and information and assistance for their test takers. I spent some time last week going through their website and social media, and I was very, very blown by how much support you provide for your test takers. So that's amazing, and thank you. In terms of benefits to moving to Australia, okay, where do I start? For healthcare professional, it has been a growing demand in Australia, and so as everywhere else in the world, due to an aging population and expanding healthcare system. And there are many visas available, and most visa processes are fast track. So the Australian migration system provides streamlined migration processes for healthcare professionals. It's good to note all the states' health industry is on top of the priority list. So that's very important for healthcare professionals across the world to know that you are wanted in Australia. There are regional opportunities, incentives for professionals to work in regional areas, offering additional visa pathways and benefits. For benefits, for example, New South Wales government offering 20,000 Australian dollars incentive for healthcare workers relocating to regional areas. Generally speaking, there are high quality of life as we all enjoying it in Australia. So you would have access to high standard of living, excellent healthcare system, work-life balance, and a supportive community. Career opportunities are amazing, great job opportunities and professional development. The salaries, it's quite high compared to other countries for healthcare professionals. We actually working on a very detailed publication for healthcare professionals migrating to Australia, and one section of it is comparing the salaries for healthcare professionals in Australia compared to the UK, and that was amazing to know the comparison. There are programs and resources to help international healthcare workers to integrate into Australian healthcare system. For example, what Alex mentioned about OET preparing them for working in Australian healthcare system, and there are access to ongoing training and professional growth opportunities in Australia for healthcare workers. And I see in consultations that it's dream of many healthcare workers across the world to work in our healthcare system. The standards and qualities are amazing, and we're one of the leaders in the world. So that would be some of the benefits of migrating. And more than ever now, it would be easiest, the most streamlined pathway to migration to Australia if you're a healthcare worker.
Thank you so much both for your time. Clearly, there is a strong demand for healthcare occupations all over the world, and Australia is no exception. I'm sure that the audience will find all this information super valuable. So thank you again, both Alex and Tarane. And if you want to know more about the OET English test or understand the visa application process, I leave you all the relevant links down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.